Phoenix Down Radio is on the air.
Welcome everybody to Phoenix Down Radio, episode number 161. I'm your host, Klauss Nightbringer, and joining me is Seyrr Timono. What's going on, buddy?
Yo, we had library programs. They actually went really well.
So you actually had to work on a Saturday?
Yeah, it happens from time to time.
Oh yeah.
I thought I was back to the normal Monday to Friday thing, but fortunately it's mostly done by like 1 or 2 p.m. So no worries for getting to see all of you wonderful folks.
Which is good, because what would we do without you, Seyrr? We'd cry.
Wither away. It would be very, very sad.
It would be sad. We would have a lot of black elpis flowers.
They'd probably be crumbling to dust. Such despair. Such heart-rending. I can't even keep this up. Anyways, hi.
So welcome everybody. Hope you guys had a great time since the last episode. Want to throw a shout out to our Patreon producers, Nick Nar, Aurori, and Tibiant, and welcome our newest patron, Confused. Thank you so much for all of your support. We really do appreciate it. What have you been up to since the last episode, Seyrr?
Done a bit of like traveling around, fating across the world, leveling Red Mage, a little bit more Pandemonium Savage, which again feels weird to actually be trying Savage rating, but it also feels oddly accessible at this point. I don't know if Pandemonium is just easier or if I've just gotten better, but either way, it's actually pretty enjoyable.
Cool. The first tier is generally the one that's the most accessible for people to get into. It's the second tier that seems to be where they ramp up the difficulty, and then the third one they kind of tone it down just a touch.
Yeah, second definitely looks pretty wild. Spender did manage to get his first clear on it last week, I want to say. So if I can get a little bit more down on P1S, he's willing to try to teach me P2.
Oh my.
Oh wait, you weren't.
What was even oh my about that?
Never mind.
Oh, did I say something dirty and not even notice it?
No, I'm just trying to force the innuendo. It is a thing.
If you have to force it, you need to slow down and use more lube. Wait, what?
That's what she said.
There we go. Also, good advice in general. You shouldn't ever need to force it. Go slower, maybe back off and cuddle for a bit. So anyways, Pandemonium.
Which we're going to be talking about more in depth later tonight, so look forward to that. Anything else fun?
Lots of, a lot of it's really just trying to keep up with work stuff. Like now that I've actually started getting a handle on what's going on, it turns out I have a lot more things to do, and we're going to be going back to in the office, so I cannot hang out on Discord all day quite as much.
Well, you can. Just need to make sure.
I mean, I'm totally going to
it.
anyways, but I need to be a little more circumspect about it.
And that's why we have our smartphones.
Exactly.
And Bluetooth earbuds and such.
Yeah. Also, picnic baskets. I am looking through picnic basket reviews. I was ranting about that a little on pre-show, but
I don't think that picnic basket is going to help you at all on Discord.
I don't know. There's got to be a Discord for them somewhere.
Well, I'm sure there are, but not anyway.
We were having like a bunch of unseasonably warm weather, and now it's back to gray skies and like mid-50s, so maybe I've got a bit longer before I'm thinking about picnics.
I would take that, because I mean, we had below zero weather again last week, so it was very cold. We got a little more snow. Had to actually break out the snowblower again this week. Ooh. Because we had a decent amount of snow fall in. As far as my work,
I'm Klauss. I live somewhere with weather.
Yes, four seasons even. Winter, road construction, and mosquitoes. But it's actually been a pretty busy couple of weeks for me. Did some puppy sitting last weekend while my folks were on a cruise. So I had to watch their dog for a few days, which was really fun. Got a new phone. I ended up getting the S22 Ultra. and it is really sweet. If you're interested in getting a new device, I do recommend it. It's very cool because it also has the S Pen built into it, so it's a little tablet. You can write on it and such. It's really cool.
Nice.
My old one was the also a Note, so this is kind of their return to that form factor. So that's kind of nice. But I also got a real rice cooker.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Understand.
Go ahead.
My understanding is that you pretty much make the rice and you just leave it on warm all day, and then you just like take rice from it all day.
You definitely can do that. I'm still kind of leery about that whole thing, but just because of what I'm used to. In the past, I always made my rice with my Instant Pot pressure cooker, which did a pretty decent job, but rice was a little bit on the mushy side. But I actually have restaurant quality rice in an hour, and it's amazing. I had some just delicious tamago gohan. Where you take the egg, crack it on top, mix it in. So good. So good.
One thing I've done once or twice is just crack an egg on top, leave it as is, and close the rice cooker.
Okay, so you cook it that way. See, for me, like I said, you scoop the rice into the bowl.
I'm familiar with tamago gohan.
Okay. Also made some really tasty fried rice today. With the 3 ingredients: egg, fried, and rice. That's all you need. Oh, and MSG.
Yeah.
Actually, I didn't have MSG, so I used lots of chilies. Aside from that, got my car fixed up, so everything should be good to go now. Had a small coolant leak that I had addressed, and everything should be really awesome. It was just been a really busy couple of weeks for me, so kind of nice to just kick back and relax a little bit. So let's go ahead and jump into some game and community news. And right now, Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia is celebrating its 4th anniversary. And in honor of that, Square Enix teamed up with How to Drink, which is a YouTube channel and I believe a content creator. And they made their take on the Phoinix Down. So because it was so aptly named, I had to put that in our show notes because it actually looked kind of interesting. Let me go ahead and copy and paste the link
It's
here.
apparently a cinnamony riff on a drink called the Corpse Reviver, which seems very appropriate here.
For those who are interested in the recipe, it is 1 ounce of lemon juice, half an ounce of a cinnamon flavored simple syrup, 1 ounce of London dry gin, 1 ounce of Cointreau or whatever your favorite orange liqueur is, 1 egg white, and then shaken until frothy in a Boston shaker, and then served in a wide glass. And then they garnished it with a little feather, which was kind of cute. But then you just drink it and you will feel revived. But yes, it seemed kind of interesting and cute. I've really been enjoying the little collaborations that Final Fantasy and Square Enix have been doing with a number of community members. Remember the Moogle cake?
Yeah, it definitely feels like they're reaching out to a lot more folks, taking advantage of a lot of the creativity that you find among the fans of Final Fantasy. So, I know plenty of people who are willing to try pretty much anything if it's got the Final Fantasy name on it.
Mm-hmm. There's even a local brewery, or at least local to Minnesota, that has a beer named Final Fantasy. And I'm interested to maybe see if I can find that in a liquor store and give that a try. Not sure if it's necessarily my kind of beer. I don't remember what it was, but I just remember that they had a beer. So that was kind of neat. Hopefully they don't get sued into oblivion, but SE doesn't seem to be quite as litigious, but we'll see. Anyway, the DICE Awards were this past week, and Final Fantasy XIV won RPG of the Year, which is pretty freaking neat, especially since it's an ongoing game. I believe it more was for Endwalker and its amazing end to the 12-year story that they have been going through.
For those who aren't familiar, the DICE Awards are an award show for the video game industry that have been going for about 25 years now. The industry thinks of them as the equivalent of the Oscars for video games. So taking something in that is already pretty prestigious. The fact that an MMORPG was able to take the award for Best RPG, it once again just speaks to the sheer quality of it and how much it's been able to kind of break people out of their traditional modes of thinking of what can and can't qualify as a really, really good game.
Yeah, so congratulations to the team, and we look forward to the new storyline moving forward. We also had a live letter that happened last weekend, and there was a lot of information that came out of that. I didn't catch it live, but I read through a couple of different summaries of it. We're going to be referencing Nova Chrysalis and Gamer Escape, so thank you so much to them for their detailed analysis. Let me go ahead and copy and paste the URLs here for you, for those who are interested. Here's the one for Nova Chrysalis, and did you put the Gamer Escape one in the up here, did you not? Copy. I got it. All right. Let's go ahead and start with the roadmap. Yoshida wants to keep Final Fantasy XIV going for at least another 10 years. You know, they're really looking at Final Fantasy XI for that. I mean, that game has been going since 2001.
Yeah, Final Fantasy XI is well into it, over 20 years at this point.
No,
so
they're just coming up on 20 years.
Are they?
It was 2002, I guess, when they came up. Because yeah, this is the We Are Van deal is in celebration of 20 years.
Got it. So yeah, and they should be able to at least manage that for 14, given just how strong the response has been to it.
Some of the big things that they're going to be addressing to try and bring in new players is to make the beginning of the game, A Realm Reborn, more of a solo-friendly experience. With that in mind, they're looking at revamping some of the endgame content, like Cape Westwind, turning that into a solo instance, changing Praetorium and Castrum into 4-player dungeons, and shortening them as well, and then turning like the Ultima weapon fight into a 4-player trial, and then the La Habrea fight would be just a single-player instance.
Yeah, they talked a little bit about, specifically in looking to expand the player base, how you have lots of longtime Final Fantasy fans who happily play every game in the series except for 11 and 14, and have avoided those ones specifically because they're the online ones, as well as just other people who enjoy games in general but aren't necessarily looking to be forced to interact with others. Yeah. They see this as like a prime opportunity for expansion, and as part of that, they want to make 14 a little bit more able to support a traditional single-player experience as well as the multiplayer experience.
Yep. They're also looking at taking the system that they introduced within Shadowbringers, the Trust system, and putting that into a lot of the MSQ dungeons for A Realm Reborn.
Yeah.
So that way you can play it as a single-player instance, but if you still want to play with friends, matchmaking is still available. So you can still use the Duty Finder for all of that. But I understand. I mean, there is a huge issue. A lot of people are afraid to play with other people, you know, because of, you know, they're afraid of being called out for not knowing something. I mean, all that is real.
I have friends who just have severe social anxiety and love the game, love to see all the crazy stuff going on in Limsa Lominsa, get very, very anxious at the idea of being forced to party up with someone, to have to go through this thing if they're like, but they still really like the world, like the setting, want to be able to enjoy it. They talked a little bit more about some of those trust specifics, especially if since they'd be adding that to those earlier dungeons. That those trust allies, while they would include the Scions in some cases, would also include members of the Adventurers Guild, just other adventurers, depending on what would be story appropriate.
Yep.
They'd really like to have, for certain dungeons, have appropriate important NPCs join you. For instance, with the battle against Nidhogg having Estinian join you, but that would require some amount of tweaking of the dungeon and of the script. I'm thinking of, for instance, in the area where you have Estinian as kind of like this mechanic that's used in that last battle against Nidhogg, where if he's also a member of your party, that wouldn't work, and they might have to change the mechanics around a bit.
Yep. And then the other thing they had mentioned, well, the other thing that they're actually currently doing is, the fact that the game is available to play on a free trial basis, which was actually brought back and reinstated as of February 22nd. So if you had been on the free trial, you can go ahead and start using your character again and sign back into the game. But
I already know people who have jumped back in because they were just waiting for it to get that opportunity.
But I can see them expanding and making Stormblood available soon, and continuing that, so people who maybe don't want to spend $15 a month on a subscription to get the latest content, they can at least enjoy the storyline, play as much as they want, and if they decide maybe it's worth it to them, pay for it and continue on, or they can just wait until new content is available for free. So it's kind of a nice way to at least include those who are a little bit more opposed to paying for an ongoing game.
Yeah. Now, they did, of course, make clear that those who enjoy the multiplayer content are not going to be forced into a single-player regime. This is more just about expanding the player base rather than retooling who it's aimed at.
It's giving options to the players.
Yeah.
There's more than one way to skin a cat, they say.
I feel like I should object to this.
Well, technically, it's true.
Yeah. In addition to expanding the player base, they talked a bit about graphical upgrades.
Now, this one I'm really interested in. I want to see what they come up with. The screenshots that they showed of some of their work in progress were phenomenal.
Yeah, to have a game that's going to continue to remain popular, to be enjoyed by players for the next 10 years, they want to make sure that the graphics are going to be up to snuff, and it's not going to be something that continues to look more and more dated.
Give me ray tracing, Yoshi!
They did show several screenshots of in-progress enhancements, increasing resolutions, adding additional lighting points, improving textures, adding environmental objects to locations, and a lot more beyond that.
That grass that they showed was amazing. I mean, it was night and day compared to what we have currently in the game.
Yeah, I definitely recommend hunting down some of those screenshots. You can see them in the links that Klauss did throw into the chat there. They did specify that they are not going for photorealism and showed a couple very disturbing screenshots as examples of what that would look like, and explicitly cautioned us to not expect the graphical quality of a AAA standalone game. This is still going to be an MMO. This is something that needs to be able to support multiple players, and thus is going to need stuff that's a little bit down-tuned to make it reasonable to process quickly. And they also do want to keep the game accessible to as many people as possible. Though they did mention that some changes in those minimum operating specifications are inevitable.
Yep, you're not going to require a 3090 to play 14. It's just recommended.
If they're even available by then.
What are you talking about? I have one.
This is the kind of comment that ends up with you being led up to the guillotine as part of the unthinking bourgeoisie.
What, just because I didn't give you cake? Do you want cake?
Yes.
Would you like some cake?
Yes.
Okay, I'll give you cake. But let's talk about some roadmaps first, especially moving forward in the new storyline. They said 6.1 is scheduled to release sometime in April, so that's not that far off. But one thing that is changing is the frequency as to which the major patches are going to be released. In the past, they had talked about a 3.5 month window between major releases, you know, the 0.1, 0.2, 0.3 patches. But they're going to extend that out a bit now to a 4-month window. It gives them time to really, you know, make sure that everything that they need is ready to go, that the code is tight, and it reduces the number of bugs and emergency patches that are needed.
Yeah.
And with the state of the world right now, it is still difficult for people to work in an office and a lot of times, and you know, there's a little bit of delays involved when it comes to working from home and making sure that everybody's able to get in touch and work together properly. It just makes sure that everybody's good to go. So I'm okay with that.
They specifically cited extra time for some of that implementation and quality control, as well as the holidays, and they even got into a little bit of exploration of just how much the game has expanded, comparing patch 3.3 series to patch 5.3 series in terms of the number of quests, how many more jobs they have to balance, the amount of text that they have to translate, the tasks for the UI team, all sorts of stuff like that. Just looking at this, the voiced word count more than doubled.
Yep. So, I mean,
plus having additional races to equip with gear, all sorts of stuff like that. The amount of work that they have to do has expanded a lot. And while they have increased staff over the course of the game, they've discussed a bit as well about how it's not like an assembly line. Just adding more people on doesn't necessarily speed things up. In addition to specifically wanting to avoid burnout and having too much crunch time.
Exactly. I mean, you can throw people at it until you're, you know, out of room, but the team you have has to be a cohesive unit. And I understand, you know, it takes time to get people also ramped up and ready to work at that level, and they have to work together.
There's certain types of tasks that do not get sped up just because you're throwing more people at them. Exactly. Especially, again, for more types of complex things like this. At a certain point, the time it takes is the time it takes, and just adding more isn't going to help. You can only parallelize so much.
Yep. So let's talk about some of the things that they discussed that'll be coming forward in future patches. 6.1, for instance, they said there's going to be somehow further Hildebrand adventures.
Yeah,
in quotes.
Somehow further was in the name. Like, even the titles of it are recognizing just how ridiculous this whole thing is.
Tadaru's Grand Endeavor. So we'll get a little side story with Tadaru. That's kind of cool.
Given that she was moving to establish herself as one of the preeminent crafters of the realm, I'm looking forward to seeing how we're going to end up involved in that. Maybe recovering rare materials? Maybe going around hawking her wares? Celebrity endorsements with the Warrior of Light? You know she would do it.
And the Myths of the Realm Alliance raid is also going to be coming out in 6.1. They're going to be introducing the new PvP mode, the Ultimate Dragon Songs Reprise, which is going to be...
Not quite sure what will be included. Is that going to be Nidhogg, Thordan? Maybe we're going to get...
a little bit of all of it?
Yeah. There could be a lot going on there. They can draw from most of Heaven's Word for that. If you're just talking about the Dragon Song War, it's nice and broad.
And everybody's favorite mom is going to be a new customer for custom deliveries.
I've already seen enough comments about how
the glamours that people are giving her.
Someone mentioned about how he's going to custom deliver Alphino and Alice a new sibling.
Oh my.
Oh. Now, granted, I'm pretty sure Emiliance would crush them into the dust with that perfectly pleasant smile on her face, but...
And I bet you that the person who said that would enjoy every minute of it.
New tribe quest with the Arca Sadara. They specifically mentioned... they specifically mentioned wanting to move away from the term beast tribe quests and now just referring to them as tribe quests. Given some of the stuff we'd already explored with Shadowbringers, it makes sense that they kind of want to get away from the whole beast man name.
Yeah, it's going to be one of those things that's going to be tough for the player base to probably lose as well, but it's a smart move forward.
Yeah. Ishgardian housing in Imperium, the new high difficulty Unreal Trial Ultima's Bane. I'm happy to see the Ultima weapon fight. I always felt like it's the closing of this first act. It needs to be something that is feared and respected. So I'm happy to see it getting the Unreal treatment.
Let's skip ahead a little bit in the notes, just to talk
Sure.
a little bit about the housing that's going to be coming in 6.1. Along with Ishgard housing, they are going to be implementing the lottery system. And they kind of talked a little bit about how that's all going to work. And that not every ward will necessarily have the lottery system. I believe it's going to start that way, but
Yes.
they're going to be monitoring the supply and demand of housing, and they will have the ability to, on a ward level basis, so each of the different wards, they can choose whether or not it's using the current style of first come first serve, or if they're going to implement the lottery system, and if it's going to be for free companies or individuals.
Yeah. So yeah, they discussed 4 different ways to buy plots based on whether the ward is going to be an individual ward or a free company ward, and whether it's using first come first serve or the lottery system. As Klauss mentioned, they're going to start off with everything using lottery methods, but depending on how demand changes, they do want to reserve the right to go back to that first come first serve if it makes sense to have some amount of that available.
Exactly.
Under the lottery system, the individual or FC can only enter for 1 plot of land at a time, and they do have to pay the full cost of the plot up front to enter.
Yes.
If you don't win that plot, of course, you do get the full refund.
And if you do win the plot and you decide not to take the house, you lose your guild.
They want people to seriously commit to it rather than using it as a thing for speculation
or for griefing.
Yeah.
So if you're interested in getting a new house, make sure you have all the money up front and are ready to go. And you don't necessarily have to worry about rushing right away to that prime spot you want. You're going to have just as much a chance as everybody else to get the house.
I'm sure a lot of people will appreciate being able to get their lives back.
Mm-hmm. No 24 hours straight of clicking.
Yeah. Future releases in the patch 6.x series will include the long-awaited Island Sanctuary, Criterion, a variable difficulty dungeon for 1 to 4 players. They did specifically note that it would be something where it's not necessarily for a person, so a lot of speculation on what might be involved in that.
It seems interesting.
Yep. A new deep dungeon in 6.3, along with a 5th ultimate fight. Feels a little surprising to be getting like 2 ultimates that close together.
That is very close together. I would have imagined that one being 6.4 or 6.5, and they still reserve the right to push it back if they're not ready.
It's possible that they were doing some amount of development work during the Endwalker cycle and just didn't get a chance to implement it until now. That this is where some of that pandemic time got things pushed back to.
Yep.
The continued updates for Pandemonium, other various improvements that will be announced later on. They made very sure to emphasize that this list is not complete. They did mention a Blue Mage update in there, which I'm sure a lot of people will be pleased to hear.
Yeah, I can see bringing them up to 80. I would also like to see potentially another limited job that they have been really hinting at a lot. Like a lot. Like
Apothecary.
Yes. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see. I mean, they've hinted that it's going to be Beastmaster, but I'm sure it's something that they're trying to work on, so we won't rush it.
Yeah.
All right. And yeah, so that's a lot of what they talked about before they jumped into a very extensive question and answer session that they pulled from the official forums. So everybody had a chance to put in their questions, and
yeah, there is so much here. I don't think we have time to go through even half of it.
Yeah, we'll pick and choose a few of some of our favorites, such as, let's see, jump it down to the question about the Ancients and the Sundering, because everybody wants to know, will we get more ASM details in the future?
Yeah,
it's
a little bit of some questions about what ASM might have been up to during the final days, how the whole rifted separation with Emmett Selk went down, all the stuff like that. And that's one that, at the moment, is going to be a secret. The developers, of course, do have an idea of what Asm might have been up to, but they're not really sure if they're going to have a chance to talk about it in the future. But at the same time, they want to encourage us, since Asm is supposed to be like this kind of reflection, so to speak, or like aspect of the Warrior of Light ourselves, to imagine when you think about what would I have done if Van Al had told me all this, that's probably going to be pretty close to the truth. They noted that some people have said stuff like, I don't know, play around with housing, play some mahjong, and if that's the case, that's probably what happened.
Maybe an ancient version of the gold saucer.
Man, I wonder if they had so many questions about their culture.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we just got a very small glimpse into it when we went into Elpis.
Yeah. There's been questions going on for quite a while about Gaius and the masks that he had been carrying, and about whether there might be any other sundered Asians remaining. They did note there are probably still some of the sundered black mask wearing ones around, but however many there are, they can't necessarily say if they'd be on the source or one of the reflections. If we do end up traveling to reflections in later content, that might be something that we run into. Kind of reminds me of the whole thing of after World War II, going onto islands where you found people who still didn't know that the war was over and were very confused about what was going on. They did note that the masks that Gaius had specifically belonged to Ultima and Dudalafon, but that just because he has the masks doesn't mean that he was actually able to vanquish them. We've seen what it takes to actually destroy an Asian, so encouraged us to keep that in mind with theorizing about what might have happened. Maybe he was able to force them to retreat to the rift. Maybe they left the mask behind, tricking him into thinking that he defeated them. They definitely encouraged us to speculate a bit about that, which often seems to hint that this is something that will come up a little bit later.
Plus, they kind of maybe want to see what the player base thinks about it, and maybe they'll kind of adjust their stories based off if they encounter something that they really like. Yeah. I mean, it's not the first time that the player base has been an active part of writing the story. I mean, look at that one fan fest when we got to name that fish in the
I was just talking about that this last week, the vegetarian.
Yes. So I mean, it's definitely something that we could, as the players, be actively involved with, whether we know it or not. They asked about Xenos. A lot of people figured that Xenos can't be completely dead. I mean, he's only was destroyed at the edge of the universe, but he can't be gone, can he?
We saw him stop breathing.
Yeah, we also saw him slit his own throat.
But yes, without explicitly saying yes, he's definitely dead, their answer, where did that one go?
I mean, as we saw, his body remains in a dimension separate from our universe and all of its laws. We depicted his ultimate fate at length in a cutscene, so I think the answer is to watch that and see how you feel. We did show him stop breathing and his heart stop beating, right? Right.
I mean, the thing is, when you tell people to watch it and see how you feel, a lot of people will feel, I don't like this answer and I want it to be different. But it seems fairly clear what they're trying to say with that.
I think they want him to be done, but is he really done?
Oh, and actually, this one here about whether Zodiark and Heidelin were completely destroyed or whether bits may remain on the other reflections starts with, I'm going to give a straight answer here. Oh, they know just how much they're leaving ambiguous. But they did confirm that, yes, Heidelin was completely destroyed, and that Fandaniel crushed Zodiark's core, which completely destroyed him, that the parts of Zodiark that were in the other reflections faded into oblivion when his main body was destroyed.
Which would explain why Elidibus could no longer feel Zodiark after the events on the moon.
Yep. there was a very long thing talking, because this is another one I know that had caused a lot of argument and debate in the community among people who still wanted to see that Venal was somehow the villain, that she didn't give the ancients enough of a chance, all sorts of things like that. And so someone explicitly asked, was sundering the star really the only way to save it? And they went into a lot about it, about how the other ancients thought, okay, we'll summon Zodiark to be the solution to the whole threat of the Endsinger, that Venal saw that this would leave them unable to change as a people and that they would be their own undoing. They talked a little bit about how in the dungeon, the Dead Ends, that final boss, the one with those beautiful golden fields with the people begging for death at the hands of Ra Allah, that was their vision for what might have happened to the ancients if they just continued as they were. And so she specifically chose to sunder the star to dilute the ether of the ancients, give them force them into a situation where they would be able to use Dynamis, stop the final days at the source. That Venal herself was really clear that this wasn't a simple matter of good and evil, and that she agonized about her decision a lot. One that I was not expecting, but pointing out this whole time that, for instance, with Shadowbringers, Emmett Selk has been making decisions about how humanity isn't perfect. All of these different ancients that had been making decisions that would affect the whole of humanity about what's worthy to survive, about what's needed, that Venal's thinking actually is very much in line with a lot of those principles of the ancients, which I will tell you, several of the lore mongers were talking about at the time, and I can tell you that Anonymous himself was rather gleeful about the whole thing, given that his position has always been Crystal Mom loves you and tried her best. And here it's no, the thing she did, it sucked, and it was also the correct answer. So they went into a lot of depth about that. I know that answer has made a lot of people very unhappy.
But it is what it is, you know?
Yeah. In the chat, Alshalon is mentioning about favorite question being about how the 3 unsundered Ascians were able to remain unsundered, which that was another interesting one. Talking about how Venal specifically left an avenue for Emmett Selk to escape. And so he escaped to the rift while that was going on, bringing La Habrea and Elidibus with him. But this idea that even in all that, she was even though Venal had not necessarily said, okay, this is definitely what the visitor for the future described is what's going to happen, was still keeping that in mind and taking that into account on her, in her plans. A couple of questions that have been about long-running things, about whether the sundering affected outer space, how far it went. They did note that the moons of the reflections do have a significance, that they can't tell us what it is. After the sundering, since Zodiark was imprisoned in the moon, the other reflections also got moons, and pieces of Zodiark were placed in those. They did say that this is something that they're going to revisit and explore properly later, but that yes, there is some meaning to the fact that the sundered worlds also ended up with moons.
Well, that, and it just makes sense because that'd be reflections of their local area, so to speak, of space.
Yeah. Some more practical questions about the balance of various jobs. They're talking about wanting to make a lot of adjustments in 6.1. The Living Dead was specifically called out as something that's going to be adjusted. Feedback about Machinist and White Mage. Dragoons who are concerned about the jump animation lock. They also mentioned that with the increasing number of jobs, they are looking to increase the number of glamour plates. It looks like they're also considering larger scale adjustments to the glamour system as a whole, but they specifically cited increases in glamour plates.
And glamour dresser increases sometime within the 6.x series.
Yep.
So nice. Mine's starting to get full.
Relating to glamour, some questions about costumes like Gargalean Imperial officers or Charlayan foreman stuff. They didn't get into the Charlayan ones, but specifically noted that up until 6.0, they mostly showed the Garleans as ruthless enemies, but now that they've done more content where you're getting other perspectives, where you're seeing them as normal people, they feel like they could release more gear that's going to be Garlean themed.
Well, I mean, we have had the Garlean soldier stuff from way back in 2.0.
Yeah, but I think
And
like having
in 4.0.
Yeah, there was the very Eastern styled one that you had there, but it sounds like they want to go ahead and have some more of those different costumes available. There was, of course, the obligatory housing question about Charlayan housing, or perhaps the moon housing that the Loperints were working on. And it starts with, please just try living in Ishgard first. We cannot keep up.
Come on, I want moon apartments.
Ultima Thule or Riot. But I can almost hear the crying in that question. Nothing we give them is enough. They want to live everywhere.
Well, yeah, if you wouldn't make everything so beautiful, we wouldn't want to live everywhere then. But then we also probably wouldn't want to play the game as much. But it's a double-edged sword, Yoshi P. You make this game amazing and we want everything about it. We can't help it. We're greedy.
All right. I only got like 7 results for Elpis housing when, but
I mean, if I could live
that
anywhere...
that one is so plot impossible. Also, it's a research facility. Why would it have a residential district? And yet, people are still asking.
I mean, there are dorms there. So, why not? And when we go back, we're full-sized.
Let's see. A question about female Hrothgar, while they're working on the graphics update, they had not forgotten about it. They are working on a variety of styles for female Hrothgar. They've picked a couple that they're working on how they'll look in character creation. It'll be some time, but it is something they're continuing to work on. And this was one where they mentioned that some players say, hey, maybe not a lot of people are going to play it, and saying that, not everyone needs to use all races equally, that people decide what characters to play for a lot of different reasons. Some people may like a specific type of character, so they want to make sure that they're offering a wide variety and that they're not going to be overly focused on who is playing what, as long as everyone has a good time.
Yep, and just remember... when the Viera and Hrothgar were added, Yoshi said, "This is the last time we add a new race."
Yeah, and he's like, because I said that, and people will come out with ideas for new races. Please, no. If your memory was vague up to this point, remember it now. Female Hrothgar is the last one I want to do.
But it doesn't mean it will be the last.
I think it is reasonable to assume that at this point. Well, I mean, I know one of the things with Hrothgar was being able to have something that was like a bit more bestial. Like, that was one of the ones when we were talking about Viera and people saying, hey, we want bunny boys. It's like, you've got something similar to bunny boys and cat boys. Yes, one has the ears. Like, there's differences. But if you're looking for like people who want to play like kind of smaller, more agile, more waifish male type things, you kind of already had that available. And for people who wanted this more like bestial savage or these other aspects of it, they didn't really have anything.
But 10 years is a long time to go without new races.
I mean,
just
yeah,
keep that in mind.
Never say never on that, but I think it's probably not front of mind here.
No, definitely not. But, don't 100% rule it out.
Yeah. That said, much like the housing thing, there is a little bit of, please just take a look at what we've already got before you start asking for a new one.
Yeah. Just enjoy, play the game, have fun. But you know what? Like I said, if it's something you legit want, you can ask for it very respectfully on the official forums. And they do read it, and they do go through it. And they also have now announced that there's going to be another live letter next weekend.
Oh my god, it never stops.
Live letter 69 is going to be scheduled for March 4th. Yeah. Though this one is going to be at 6 a.m. Eastern time or 3 a.m. Pacific time.
That's not happening.
This is going to be a Japanese only audio stream, whereas the last one had English translations right away. But there will be English and Japanese on the slide deck. So if you are up at that time and want to take a look, you can definitely tune in. But there will also be live translations from the fan community, and there will be an official digest released a few days after the live letter. But in this one, they are going to be discussing patch 6.1 part 1 and other miscellaneous updates. This is going to be on the standard Final Fantasy XIV Twitch, YouTube, and Nico pages. So if you please look forward to that, and we will be discussing a little bit about that in the next episode. And for those of you who do have housing, make sure you go and jump in at some point, because the automatic housing demolition timer will be resuming on March 9th. If you have been in your house anytime in the last 4 months since the timer was stopped, it has been reset to 0, so you're all right to go. But if you have not been in the game or gone into your house since then, you may want to, because you could lose your house a couple of days after that. So,
or, just let it go back to the live stream. These things happen.
I mean, if you really don't want the house, by all means, go ahead and relinquish it. But if you do, make sure you stop in. So yeah, a lot of unexpected information out of that last live letter, and the fact that we're getting another one in another week. So it's pretty crazy. So we're gonna have lots of stuff to talk about. But for this week, let's go ahead and talk about the last big chunk of story that we have yet to get through, and that's the Pandemonium storyline for the raid tier.
Total Pandemonium.
Yeah.
Is that our episode title? We'll come back to it.
I want to throw a thank you to Final Fantasy Fandom for their synopsis of this. They did a really nice job of putting this together, so I didn't have to.
Yeah.
One great thing about the internet is you don't always have to reinvent the wheel, but there's a link to their page. I thought they did a good job. To start with, they explained what Pandemonium was.
Just as a reminder, Elpis was a facility that was used by the ancients to test their various creations and concepts to see, how will this behave in an ecosystem? How will this interact with the others? To make sure that something was going to be ready before they released it to the world at large.
Yes. Now, Pandemonium was a facility far beneath Elpis that contained and researched monsters created through the ancients' creation magics that were deemed too dangerous to be released into the world of Aetheris, but too valuable to outright destroy. Each region of Pandemonium was overseen by a keyword who oversaw the maintenance and the seals and answered to the chief keyword, formerly Athena, before her duties were taken over by her surviving husband, Lahabria.
Oh, all right. They are already busting out those mythological references there. Athena.
Yes.
One wonders, so you've got these things down there. What was the value that they were getting out of them? I suppose in the case of that Phoinix that you've got, like, they had been continuing to develop the concept, so maybe they could still get something out of it. But one wonders what other value they were getting that made it something they couldn't just discorporate.
Yep. So let's go ahead and jump into how we got into the storyline. So, part 1 of the Pandemonium raid series is called Asphedelos. I probably totally slaughtered that.
Asphedelos.
Okay, so it wasn't too far off. So sometime after their triumphant return from Ultima Thule, the adventurer encountered a Charlean researcher named Nemijiji, waiting for them outside the Baldasian Annex. From her, they learned that a scientist named Claudian down in Aporia, down at the very bottom of Labyrinthos, I couldn't think of the name for a second, was requesting our help with a matter of urgent importance. After meeting and talking with Claudian, they reveal that they're in charge of using the telescope to research the ethereal sea. Before the forum directed all of its efforts to be focused on the Exodus, he and his team had discovered a unique crystal that appeared to have a greater etheric density than any crystal known before. And they hoped that we, having encountered many phenomena many think would be impossible, would be potentially able to shed some light on its origins.
Now, this crystal was the same type as those memory crystals that we found way in the depths of Amrot once upon a time, the ones that had been used to awaken the memories of the former members of Convocation.
Yes, however,
as well as that Asm crystal.
Yeah, but it did not have any markings like the other ones did.
Yeah, none of those convenient constellations. So, of course, we attempt to attune to what's within it, only hearing this call for help for a crisis in Pandemonium. So you've got pretty much this, like, multi-millennia message in a bottle, tossed out into the ethereal sea. How did it even end up in there?
Plot armor!
You've already got this really mysterious circumstance of a message, what seems to be, as I said, a message in a bottle, with no clear answer as to how it would have even reached anyone.
But after kind of explaining how we had been able to get to Elpis in the first place, they suggest that maybe we use a similar motive or the similar method to try and see if we can't figure out what's going on in Pandemonium. So we return to Elpis. We run into, literally, another ancient upon our arrival, who has introduced themselves as Themis. The young ancient asked if the adventure was the guiding star his friend had told him would help him with his task to investigate Pandemonium, since it had lost all contact with the outside world for reasons unknown. Recognizing the name, we play along, posing as Asm's familiar, again. And we agree to help Themis. And we make our journey down to the depths of Pandemonium.
As a side note, Themis in Greek mythology was one of the children of Gaia and Uranus, the second wife of Zeus. And she is associated with justice, divine order, law. Her symbols include the scales of justice. You'll often see Themis as like a thing referenced in lots of legal type things, this idea of like this ancient concept of law. So one wonders if, well, I'll get into some of the mythological associations a bit later.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and continue on. So we go down to the depths, and we find a structure down there to be eerily quiet. None of the warders in charge are in sight. But Themis detects a spell, a binding seal on the facility, which is being eroded from within, and began trying to repair it with their own creation magics. Basically,
now, of course,
go ahead.
Now, of course, that's going to take plenty of concentration on the part of Themis. So, wonderful adventurer that we are, Themis tasked us with dealing with any threats that may run into. Since, of course, we've got to have our 8 people somehow. Themis did specifically say that they would be able to create illusory familiars based on our etheric signature that would help us out in combat.
Yes, we were able to create ghosts.
Yeah. I mean, you can't even use the Asm summoning here because we're like 12,000 years in the past. It doesn't, or possibly more than 12,000 years. Mm-hmm. It doesn't quite work that way. You cannot call people like that. So that bit seems most like an excuse for why you can have 8 people there.
Yep. At this point, we do encounter one of the warders who attacks us. And then we get, this leads us into our first battle against Erichthonios.
Let me see if I can get the pronunciation on that.
How bad
Erichthonios.
Okay, so it wasn't too bad.
Yeah, Erichthonios. Though most people I know at this point just refer to him as Eric.
Yes, but not the bike man. If you're from Minnesota, you get it.
As a side note, mythology-wise, Erichthonios was a legendary ruler of ancient Athens. according to some of the mythology, he was born from the earth and was raised by the goddess Athena.
Makes sense, as there's more we hear about in the future. This is our first fight in the series, and it's actually a really good introductory fight. It's not too difficult. I really liked a lot of the new mechanics that were given, especially like the hot and cold towers was interesting.
As a warder who is responsible for keeping creatures sealed within Pandemonium, a lot of Eric Thonius's mechanics and aesthetics are focused around chains. You have various things where he is, for instance, creating shackles that attach people together. There's creating like one where he's creating a web of various cells, and you need to be in the correct cell in order to avoid damage. Stuff where he's using those chains as flails. Especially during the sequences with the cells, having lots of chains all over the place. There's just a lot of chain imagery throughout, as someone who is binding and sealing and restraining.
And a lot of people probably like a lot of those chains. Anyway.
You complain about me, and then you just bring this stuff up without provocation.
You rub off on me the wrong way? I don't know.
Oh, I rub you the right way.
Anyway.
So, that's uncomfortable for everyone.
After beating Eric, just for simplification, they snap back to their senses, introduce themselves as one of the warders, and let us know that they were. After stepping back to his senses, introducing himself while informing the duo that the beastly concepts within Asphedelos, the first circle of Pandemonium, had broken free and were wreaking havoc within.
The prisoners have gotten out, and they are running rampant through the prison here.
Yes. Eric had been separated from his fellow warders before becoming overcome with negative emotions, after which his memory was blank, revealing he had no recollection of the battle that had just occurred. So he had no memory of the ass whooping he received.
You know, it's probably for the best. There would have been some hard feelings there.
Maybe.
But yes, that was another thing during the battle. He seems to be making increasingly disjointed cries about how he needs to restrain us, about how he needs to save his friends. He was clearly not doing well, and the fact that he may have been put under some type of influence keeping him from knowing what's going on makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. At this point, Themis reveals that they are working for an organization under the control of the Convocation, and that he would need to make a direct report to them to determine a suitable course of action. It's at this point that Eric pleads with Themis to delay that report, to give them time to try and save his friends and learn really what's happening in Asphedelos. Yeah.
It's strongly implied that Themis is working for Elidibus in some way or another. We, of course, get reference to a couple of different institutions. Pandemonium is under the purview of La Habrea, and so there's it seems like there's some suggestions of convocation politics. And poor Eric, in the midst of all this, just wants to do his job, wants to save his friends, also doesn't want to unnecessarily destroy all of these creatures.
I mean, he's basically grown up here a lot. I mean, we learn a little further on that La Habrea and Athena, the prior key warden, were his parents.
Yep.
So it's a family affair.
Yep. Very interesting to bring in again those mythological references there, where you have Athena, who is supposed to historically have, or mythologically have been the one of the parents of this king.
Yeah. So it's at this point that Themis reluctantly agrees, and the two of them work together basically to work and try to entrap and ensnare these escaped beasts. So we go with them and we continue our exploration. where we encounter another one of these most dangerous concepts.
I'll go ahead and also mention really quickly, because this is another thing they brought up during there, that Eric apparently is reasonably pretty skilled with a lot of those restraining binding magics, but that's about the only kind of magic that he's able to do. Yep. Themis, meanwhile, has a lot of raw power, seems to have a lot of skills that he's not giving us all of the info about. He's playing his cards close to the vest, but he is able to lend some of that power to Eric to help empower his restraining magics. Yes.
So Themis is strengthening the power of the binding magic that Eric is very adept at.
Yeah.
So it's at this point that we encounter the Hippocampus, a water-based monstrosity. This was a very difficult fight the first few times. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, this is the one that, like when friends are doing their weekly re-clears, they like to get that one out of the way first, just so they can make sure they get loot from it and don't have to go back to it.
Yeah.
Hippocampus is, of course, the word for seahorse, which in this case seems pretty literal. You have a horse, you have lots of water all over the place. I think it's actually, the Hippocampus is actually referred to in one of the side quests in Elpis as a creation that there had been some testing with, and it had been put to the side in favor of much more controllable and peaceable creatures like the hippos. So just like your regular type horse.
Well, why can't we have the cute little seahorses?
I don't know what those were actually called. Is it? I am not going down an etymology rabbit hole.
Anyway, yeah, this is a battle that actually took me a couple of tries to get through, just because of the sheer number of new mechanics that we're introduced to in this fight. It's a lot to absorb, and I'm sure that the Savage version of this is absolutely a roadblock for a lot of groups.
So, lots of stuff with water mechanics, flow pushing things around, making various areas of the battlefield impassable. The Hippocampus itself being something that that can separate some parts of its body from others, leading to having attacks going off in multiple portions of the field at the same time. The Savage version, I know, includes a mechanic where people are going to be pushed by the water in various directions and need to make sure that they collide with another player to stop their movement, because otherwise they're going to be slamming into the wall.
Oh, wow.
Yes, there is a lot going on in that fight. As I mentioned at the top of the show, Spender has cleared it, has started going over the stuff with me, and there is a lot to keep track of.
So after we learn the fight and we get through it, we are able to subdue and what's the word?
Re-imprison.
There you go. The Hippocampus. At this point, Eric explains to us that he wants to save Pandemonium for his fallen mother.
I mean, if this was like her big work, what she devoted her life to, seeing that destroyed, I could see it being like hey, this is the last thing of her memory. I want to keep it safe.
Yep. And he also mentioned that how his father ended up taking over after Athena passed kind of was a sore point to him, because he kind of, instead of spending time with Eric to mourn the loss of Athena, he just kind of drowned it out in favor of continuing to oversee Pandemonium.
This is not the first time that we've seen the people of the Unsundered world not always have the best handling of death, or dealing with the concept of it well.
Loss or any type of negative emotion.
Yep. Again, going back to the entire reason for the Sundering being to force them to confront that. Yep. But up until that point, it continues to remain a bit of their Achilles heel, not being able to handle that process, that sadness, that grief.
It's at this point we learn that each of the circles of the facility is overseen by a keyword, and the current keyword of Asphedelos is Hesperos. a kind man, he hoped managed to place the other warders in a safe location. It's at this point we continue on, and Eric tells us about another concept called the Phoinix, spelled really interestingly, Phoinix.
Yeah, that is a very old spelling of.
And it's a immortal firebird prototype created by the words of La Habrea, and the most dangerous of the creations stored within this circle.
Yeah, we saw that back in the Tales from the Shadows mini-story series, references to Emmett Selk, then Hades, helping handle an issue with an outbreak of a Firebird concept. So they mentioned that this is a concept that they have been working on for quite some time. There have been a lot of false starts. This was one of the ones that was apparently just way too aggressive, had a lot of other issues with it, but they needed to keep it around for whatever reason, so it's been hanging out in Pandemonium.
Yep. And it's at this point we actually encounter said Firebird, and the halls of the corridor change into a fire arena that enhances the beast's strength, with us forced to confront it under these conditions. We had hoped to try and lure the Phoinix down into the watery area we were with the Hippocampus, but unfortunately, somebody is a step ahead of us.
Yeah, that's 2 times now we've been forced to confront creatures like these pretty much in their element, in the thing where even the environment around them is going to allow them to use their abilities to its best advantage.
Yes. So at this point, we get to fight the Phoinix. And this was another really tough fight. But it happens on a large circular arena, and there's fire everywhere.
A fair amount of mechanics that are somewhat reminiscent of the Phoinix fight back in Binding Coil Turn 12.
Yeah, I don't remember a lot of that. I think I only ran through that a couple of times. So
yeah, stuff like having, and of course other instances where we've had to deal with Firebirds. So like for instance, the Suzaku fight, but having the smaller birds that get revived that end up they've explored the Firebird concept several times, but this one managed to feel like a little bit of a different take on it. Definitely felt a bit more savage, brutal, focused a lot more on the really fiery aspects of it.
Also, this version of the Phoinix has 3 heads.
Yeah, it's been discussed more than once among the ancients how often the concepts that people are submitting start chasing after what they think is cool, what's trendy, as opposed to what's actually practical for anything.
Come on, man. If 1 head is good, imagine 3 heads, man. But lots of different types of fire. In this fight, there's your normal fire, there's dark fire, there's creeping fire.
Yeah, there's a little bit of the death and rebirth mechanics, but mostly it's fire.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, like the part where we in the interlude portion where we have to kill the small firebirds and then they get reborn as these really weird looking entities.
That continue to accompany for the rest of the fight and make it so all the tanks are taking that many more hits, and things definitely ramp up a bit after that sequence.
But a good fight nonetheless. I did enjoy it. I thought it was really cool. I mean, I can't hate anything that has Phoinix in it, right? It's kind of on brand.
Yeah, I think one of the either the mount or the minion that drops from this series actually references how weird the spelling of Phoinix is on this one. Because yeah, that is a very archaic spelling of it.
Yep. And so we do eventually overcome and we defeat the Phoinix, and the 2 ancients bind it. And it's at this point that Themis deduces that the culprit of all this must be Hesperos. And because prior to this, Eric had discussed with us how Hesperos does have the ability to rewrite the way that Asphedelos is with a whim. I mean, he can recreate it however it's needed.
He's the keyword. He has absolute authority over a lot of aspects of the prison, and there's pretty much no one else who could have done that.
Yes. So at that point, he makes his presence known, Hesperos does, while acting scathing and arrogant with a maddened devotion to La Habrea, and really is very dismissive of Eric's abilities and powers. While he reveals to us that Eric ends up being La Habrea's son. So that's where the revelation comes forward, that Hesperos spills the beans.
Yeah, it's a marked difference from how Hesperos had been described to us, given that Eric himself had already been influenced by some unseen force and ended up in that rampage. It does make one wonder if Hesperos is perhaps also under some kind of strange influence.
And he reveals that he actually merged his essence with one of the concepts within Asphedelos before attempting to kill the three of us. Themis breaks the binding spell that Hesperos had cast on us, and we teleport outside again.
It's at this point that Eric fills in a lot of those details. I thought he'd mentioned some of it earlier, but you're right. It's at this point that we learn the stuff about how he was La Habrea's son, Athena had been his mother, a lot of those other aspects.
Yep. I mean,
and yeah,
it makes a lot of more sense when it is explained to us. So
yeah. It's also interesting, like, we as players had been told that the Pandemonium raid would, at least in part, be giving us a little more backstory on La Habrea. So it's interesting to hear that, okay, we've got the La Habrea, who is kind of the head of this whole thing, who seems to be this really distant figure, who has a son that apparently is not really all that great with magic. You get the impression that he kind of put his son in there as kind of like okay, I guess I'll give you a job. But it's the type of thing where you're always worried, did I actually get this job on merit, or is it just because my dad runs the place?
And I'm sure that a lot of the other warders probably have a little bit of a grudge against Eric because his father is in charge of the place, and his mother prior.
Yeah, that's the type of thing that's going to absolutely raise some questions.
Yes. So it's at that point, Eric says that this is not the Hesperos that he remembers, that, Hesperos was a kind person, but this is a very different being, and that his transformation must have a lot to do with the way he is right now.
Yeah. As a side note, Hesperos talks about himself as having become a hemiteos, which is another term for what we would refer to as a demigod. It's interesting that, again, in Quest with in Elpis, we find that they didn't really have as much of a conception of the idea of a deity. So the fact that he's now describing himself as a demigod or as a thing akin to that does make one wonder a little bit about what might be going on here and influencing them.
Yep. So it's at this point that we confront Hesperos, and we fight him in the fourth battle. And
they've gone to a lot of lengths to avoid having undead be an actual thing. Like with their skeletons, it's just kind of puppets whose bodies are being moved by magic. All sorts of stuff. So having something that's like, okay, technically vampires don't exist, but also this guy's totally a vampire.
Well, especially when you the minion that you get at the end of the fight.
Nosferatu,
yeah.
The vampire.
Yes, it's a tiny little bat.
Yeah. Really fun fight there. Lots of stuff going on.
The music, I mean, the music's good, but I don't know that it quite fits the mood of the actual fight itself. I mean, the first lyrics you hear, wild freaks. Very metal sounding, and
it's something that, like, we saw that with Escape as well, where it's like, okay, this thing is sort of a sea shanty, but then reimagined in this really interesting way. A lot of the lyrics do seem to deal with concepts of like noble gentlemen disguising savage nature. That you have this like very elegant, like, oh my god, Hesperos, especially when he's wearing the glasses. I was like, okay, like I can see an alternate way to solve this. What are you doing tonight? He was fucking hot.
Oh my.
I am not wrong in saying that Hesperos was hot.
You're not the only person I've heard say that, no.
Yeah. We are people of culture and taste.
And Alashalon points out in the chat, the teeth. Yes, he does have the sharp, pointy teeth.
Yeah, it's like there are some types of creatures in ancient Greek mythology that have some of those aspects of like kind of the vampire type aspects. And it's implied that he merged himself with some kind of concept to get that. And he gets something that's functionally a vampire. He's wearing like the elegant clothing. You have a lot of stuff where it's described as setting the stage, where his cape flutters down and relays out the stage beneath it. The Savage version actually has sequences of mechanics where it's referred to as like Act 1, something, is the name of a sequence of things you need to do, following through to finale and then curtain call. So there's definitely a bit of a theatrical edge to the whole thing. I also want to point out that music track, it's called Hic sunt Leones, Here Be Lions, and it is the type of thing that back then they would have used where later ones would have used Here Be Dragons. Dragons not being quite as much of a thing back then, but kind of here is like the thing out in the wild, out of civilization. Here is where the wild things are that will be stalking you and destroying you.
Well, dragons were a thing. They were just on a distant star.
I was talking Earth mythology, you punk.
Yeah, but still. Anyway, lots of interesting mechanics within this fight. Yeah, like you said, setting the stage when you got the different sections of the floor that have different elements associated with them, and you have to do different things. Mm-hmm.
You have lots of stuff where he's brandishing his sword or his cape. So again, a bit more kind of dramatic flourishing.
Yep, and having to react, and then
the vampire mechanics are done in a thing where he, for instance, kind of
he steals our ether.
Steals the essence and then poisons it.
Yep.
Yes. Before throwing it back at us, which ends up taking the form of mechanics where you want to avoid ether that came from your type of class. So, for instance, if you are a tank, you don't want to touch the stuff that came from tanks.
Yep, you go after the healer or the DPS stuff. Well, tanks and healers should go after the DPS circles, and then the DPS should go after the tank and healer circles. But
and that one again gets mixed up a bit more in the Savage version.
Yeah,
I have been reading a lot of those.
Good fight. It flows well, and again, we get rewarded with a minion and more pieces of gear.
Whatever you think of the fittingness of it for that particular piece, that song slaps.
Oh, it does. I'm not saying I don't like the song. It just it's a little bit thematically odd. When the first time I heard it, especially, I wasn't expecting it to go in that direction because it starts out with kind of like a harpsichord sound, and then shortly into it, as soon as the circle drops, wild freaks. It just stuck. You know what I mean? Yeah. Guitar hits, and I guess a great song. Just, I'm sure I'll listen to it a lot when I get my copy of the OST. Which finally,
the Savage version has a move called Heart Stake.
I like steak.
Like being staked through the heart.
I like steak. Anyway, after
what does Phoinix mean?
Okay, well, you're looking that up. I need to figure out where we were on here. Go ahead.
Oh, a Phoinix is literally a board.
So try and figure out what that means, because that's the name of the move that he casts before one of the four sections erupts. Yeah,
before he starts saying them off. So it would be a tablet made of painted wood or clay, marble, or bronze, and it would be like a devotional object that you would put in a sanctuary or in a memorial, in a burial chamber. So it's kind of like he's setting a whole bunch of boards.
And trying to kill us.
Yes.
Here, let me remember you as you die. Anyway, so after the intense battle and Hesperos' defeat, we want to try and question him to find out more information about that, but he takes his life instead. So rather than allow us to try and get an explanation. And with his death, Themis sensed the situation was further amiss deeper within Pandemonium, specifically within the Abyssos circle. And the group heard a loud roar before a seal barred our way.
Yeah. Now, at this point, we're reduced to speculating. Themis is convinced that there's some type of force that had corrupted Hesperos that was responsible for Eric's behavior, that this thing has taken the other warders and is trying to turn them into Hemitheoi as well. So this is something where we may have more of these to deal with as we descend further into the depths. But before then, they at least want to try to stabilize the current layer, Asphedelos. There's at least some amount of considering contacting the Convocation to get La Habrea's aid, something that Eric does not seem pleased at the prospect of. You have to imagine he'd be a little bit chagrined at all this getting back to his father, even if he's not the one who's responsible for it.
Yep. And then at this point, we return to the present, and we regale Claudian with our tale, who unfortunately had not made much headway with their research of this memory crystal. But believing that since the present the adventure had not changed, the intervention in the events was already a part of history, and that they should return to investigate once their team has made headway on their own tasks.
And we keep making all these time loops.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of the things that they talked about in the Q&A as well, as to why there wasn't a separate timeline. You know, why we didn't get 1985B.
Yep. The Savage story for this time around, for once, doesn't seem to involve the Wandering Minstrel, but rather one of the other researchers who wants to take notes on all the things we discovered, and then it turns out really seems to want to be a fiction writer in her spare time and gleefully starts embellishing all the stories that we tell her.
Of course.
Hey, you gotta hype it up a little bit.
Exactly.
So let's see, looking through some of the other stuff. One other one I want to mention in terms of mythology references. So Pandemonium, of course, the place of all demons. We've got this underworld theming going on. And Asphedelos is a flower that is extremely strongly associated with the dead and the underworld in Greek mythology. The poet Homer described a great meadow covered with Asphedelos flowers as this thing that when you arrive in the afterlife, it was frequently planted on graves. Persephone, the goddess who spent part of her time in the underworld as a consort of Hades, she would often appear crowned with a garland of Asphedelos. Some of the stuff I'm seeing here notes that it has gray leaves and yellowish flowers, and there's kind of a suggestion of the gloom of underworld, the pallor of death, and so that might be part of how that flower got this association with death. The roots were eaten by poor Greek citizens, and so there's an idea okay, well, this is food that's sufficient for the dead. It was also supposed to be a remedy for poison snake bites. It was supposed to be protective against certain types of sorcery. So there were a lot of those associations with it. And so that's why as we're venturing into this underworld of Elpis, our first stop is in this Asphedelos, this great field of this flower.
Interesting.
Yeah. The actual gear that you get from it, the Savage version gear is Asphedelos as well. The regular gear is Limbo, which actually comes more from Christian traditions. it wasn't actually part of original mythology, but was something that Dante created for the Divine Comedy. There's always this question of like, okay, like a baby who dies before they can be baptized, or all the people who lived before Jesus was alive. What do? They haven't been baptized. Do they get to go to heaven? And the position of the church is always like, nope, they didn't get this, so they can't get into heaven. And thought that, like a lot of people had problems with this, Dante in the Divine Comedy created limbo as kind of like the uppermost level of hell, where things are actually not really bad at all. They just don't get to live in God's presence. But that's not like anything bad is happening to them. The church actually had not approved this, but also people really, really liked that idea. I mean, if your baby dies in childbirth or something, you don't want to think that, okay, now in addition to all this, they're condemned to hell.
Yeah.
So this was something that was really popular, caught on. It is still not in a part of official teachings, but it shows up in lots of stuff. And you see limbo in general as kind of like sometimes like an afterlife waiting room or in between place.
A purgatory-like place.
Yeah, it is theologically distinct from purgatory, but practically the way people think about it, you get a lot of overlap. And so you've again got kind of that association with the afterlife. The actual arenas that you go through, there's like the flaming limbo, also like the areas that you're actually in also have limbo in the name. So we've got a lot of those afterlife associations throughout this whole thing.
Well, and it's also
love that mythology.
It's also a dance where you go under a bar and try not to fall over.
I really wonder if the name.
I think it has to do with the balance potentially.
Let me see. It might just be something where they developed completely coincidentally. The suggestion is that one is just kind of a derivative in West Indian English of limber. Because you have to be limber to get under it. And that may have no connection to the actual mythological.
But if you're feeling up to it, let's do the limbo. And that might be a better title. Just kidding. On that bombshell, we should probably go ahead and wrap it up.
And now I'm going down another etymology rabbit hole. So yeah, let's go ahead and call it there.
So that's going to go ahead and do it for this episode, guys. If you liked what you heard, please make sure to like, subscribe, or follow us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, or whatever your preferred podcatcher is. And if possible, leave us a rating or review. It helps other people find our show, and it lets us know how we're doing. If you really dig this show, you can consider joining us here live at twitch.tv/PhoenixDownRadio, where you can also subscribe to us here and get access to subscriber-only emotes and badges. Or you can go out to patreon.com/PhoenixDownRadio and support us that way, like our benevolent overlord, Aurora Fenrir, or our shadowy foreign investor, Tibian Salts. All proceeds go towards growing the show, cover hosting costs, allow us to improve and upgrade equipment, as well as do some fun things like contests and giveaways. But whatever type of support you give us, whether it's likes, emails, tweets, retweets, follows, subs, donations, we love it all, and it's all greatly appreciated. If you want to catch up on our backlog of podcasts, you can go out to our website, phoenixdownradio.com. If you have questions, comments, suggestions, or just want to say hi, go ahead and email us, podcast@phoenixdownradio.com. We are also on Twitter @PHXDNRadio. And like I said, join us every other Saturday night live here at twitch.tv/PhoenixDownRadio. Seyrr, shout outs?
I'm going to go ahead and shout out my friends Sophia, Arie, and Alumbrain, with whom we've been watching anime. Again, you have been invaluable in just getting me through some of the after work exhaustion, just sitting back and watching silly, ridiculous things happen. Also, shout out to the good folks at Maelstrom Radio, Flattish, Shintir, and Susan Sprinkle. I was a guest appearance on Maelstrom Radio with Anonymous last weekend. We had a good time, discussed a lot of stuff, made a lot of very silly jokes.
No way.
Yeah, it was great. Like, pretty much, they let me shitpost so much more than you do, Klauss, which is, I mean, like,
somebody has to keep you in line.
That's their format. Yeah, that's their format. They're like used to it. You keep me in line, which is probably better in the long run. But oh my god, is it just kind of fun to let loose with every crazy thing going through my head?
Yeah, we let you, we let you go every once in a while, but sometimes we just gotta rein you back a little bit.
That's fair. Finding me down in the depths of Asphedelos.
Yes.
You cruel bastard. God, I love that song. Wow, I don't know where my head's going right now. Anyways, you can find me on Twitter at FF14Seyrr. That's FFXIVSEYRR. Where I occasionally post pictures of random food that I made, or cool stuff I saw while working at the library, or occasionally retweet whatever nonsense Anonymous has convinced me of this time around. You can also chat with me on our Discord. Honestly, even with going back into the office, I'm still going to be probably monitoring it most of the day. So yeah, feel free to stop in, say hi, ask your lore questions, ask your questions about cooking, ask your questions about the purpose of like life and things like that, which is not the same as life, the universe, and everything. So you do not need to say 42. We do not need that nerd shibboleth right now.
42.
Oh my god, I'm going to throttle you. And yeah, I think that's about all my stuff. So how about you, Klauss? Shoutouts?
I gotta shout out you again for helping me get the notes ready to go on this, or at least cleaning up what I put in there and making it a little bit more show friendly. Otherwise, we'd be sitting here reading through about 7,000 questions from the previous live letter. A lot of stuff.
Definitely go take a look at those live letter notes. There's a lot there we didn't get to, and we trimmed some of it down for time. But for those of you who really want those details, there's a lot of good stuff in there.
And you can even go back and watch the VOD and get the whole shooting match and watch it live or taped. You know what I mean. I want to shout out everybody who's joining us live here at Twitch. Alshalant, Ravenheart, Susan Sprinkle was here earlier. Thank you so much for interacting with us. It's the best way to do the show. When we did it a couple episodes ago, when we could not broadcast it live, it wasn't the same. So shout out to you
really
guys for making the interaction a lot more fun and giving us little tangents to jump on and things to grasp. So thank you for that. I really do appreciate it. And you can follow me out on Twitter at PHXDN_KLAUSS. Aside from that, like I said, I'm looking forward to some time with family. I got an upcoming convention I'll be going to. Like I said, we got one more show, and then I go out to Detour, which is going to be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to that. Nice long weekend in a hotel suite. It's going to be amazing. So looking forward to that. Also, shout out to Confused again for being our newest patron out at patreon.com/PhoenixDownRadio. We really do appreciate all of your guys' support, so thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
So, for my co-host, Seyrr Timono, I am Klauss Nightbringer, wishing everybody a wonderful evening. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll catch you next time. Take care.
Phoenix Down Radio is a production of PhoenixDownRadio.com and Illusion Productions. Final Fantasy XIV and Eorzea are trademarks of Square Enix. In-game content for Phoenix Down Radio is the copyright of Square Enix. Opening music for Phoenix Down Radio is provided by Guilty Gear Rock You. Check out the Metal Chocobo theme cover and many other music videos at youtube.com/Guilty Gear Rock You. Closing music for this episode is provided by Guitar Wanker 90. Please check out their full version of Matoya's Cave and other rock video game covers at youtube.com/Guitar Wanker 90. The views and opinions expressed in this episode are those of Phoenix Down Radio and its hosts and do not reflect the views of Square Enix.